What's up, guys? Robert Yance here, gearing up for a night fishing trip because it's been brutally hot all week long, especially this weekend. And in order to beat the heat, I'm going to head out about 1 a.m., fish until a little bit after sunrise. That way I don't have to bear the upper 80s and mid 90s along with the humidity that we have here in Ohio. So I've got just about everything ready. I got a couple poles laying behind me, and I've got some nicks and frays on my leaders. You always want to inspect your equipment before you head out. You don't want to have a nick or a fray, and that'd be the reason you end up coming back telling a fish story instead of having photos of a trophy fish. So since I need to retie everything before I go, I wanted to show you guys a couple of the rigs that I use when I'm out drifting at Hoover Reservoir. And we'll start with this guy here. So this rig, I've got a three-way swivel, and off of the main line it comes down to just a regular snap swivel, and that snap swivel on this rig is what I use to hang my sinker from. And I can put a bank sinker on here, you know, I can put a big round sinker on here, but a lot of times I make some homemade sinkers, and there's a whole bunch of variations of sinkers that you can make for drifting, whether you're using nylon and putting bird shot in it, or if you're doing plastic tubing. For now, I've got these. They're plastic tubes and with BBs in them, and it's wire nuts glued on each end to seal it, with a eye screw and eye bolt going into the wire nut. And this one is probably 30 inches long and has 4 ounces of BBs in it. This one is probably more like 17 inches long, and it's got 2 ounces of BBs in it. I watched a video a while back that Steve Douglas put out after one of the Catfish conventions, and he had Larry Muse kind of doing a little interview in the parking lot, and he was working, he had been working on these for a long time. Since then, I think he's patented them, and he's got a more professional looking design that you can go online and order. But you know, he kind of just let out his tricks, let out his little secret of the trade, that this is what he was using going through the rivers to keep him from getting hung up when he was fishing some real rocky terrain. That this would be bumping the bottom, and it would kind of bump and glide over the rocks and the logs, instead of a bank sinker getting jammed in between the fork of a log or in between the crease of a rock. And I mean, they're not 100% snag proof, but they're pretty darn close. The 2 ounce is really plenty at Hoover most of the time. But if I get to where I'm drifting a little bit fast, if it's a little bit windy, then this big one works pretty good for me. Like I said, I rarely ever get snagged, and I only use this as a drifting rig. This is not a great setup for anchor fishing, but if I know I'm going to be out there doing a half-a-mile drift, I can set this way behind the boat and kind of let it do its thing. I'll put the small one on here just for the visual. So my main line is here. This giant thing is bumping off the ground here, and off the back on the other part of the three-way swivel is my leader. And on my leader I have a Demon Dragon, which actually this isn't a Demon Dragon, this is a Zara Spook Junior, which is pretty much the exact same thing. Here I have a package of Demon Dragons, and here we have the Zara Spook Junior. They are pretty much identical. They don't sell these most places, most bait shops around my home. These ones I ordered offline, got them off of Amazon pretty quick. I think it was like $15 for 3 of them. But you know, in a pinch, you're watching videos, you're reading things, and you're trying to get out there and experiment with new things. This is what I found at a local bait store, And to be honest, between my suspended rod or the one that I just drag without it, I probably catch 3 fish on this rig for every one that I catch on the other. And for this Demon Dragon or Zara Spook Jr. in my case, I just thread the line through the front eyelet and out the back eyelet, and then I wrap a rubber band around it. Usually I have 2. It's time to replace those 2. The other one's dry rotted and broke off or got flung off by a fish. But that way I don't have any knots. I know some people will tie off to the front, run a leader off the back. I like the flexibility to be able to move this thing around throughout my leader, and I usually keep it about 6 inches away from the hook. And I tie my leader line off first with a no-knot snail, and then I hook everything else up on here. But this is my drifting rig. I have the big sinker hanging down, and then this guy, instead of a peg float on like a normal Sandy Cooper rig that'll get beat up and dry rot or get obliterated by a fish, this thing, as long as you don't ever snag and snap your line, this will go through hundreds, maybe even thousands of fish without having to replace it like you would a cork float. So I really like this rig a lot for drifting. And then my suspended pole, a lot of times I'll just hang this 10, 15 feet off the boat and just let it drift right under the boat. I'm fishing out of a very small 8-foot 2-man pond raider. I mean, I'm not in a big boat. I can't secure pole holders and let the fish run and set the hook on itself. So I'm laying them out with my bait clicker set, drifting real slow, and doing what I can that way. So I'll hang this bait. If I'm in 20 foot of water, I'll drop it 10 feet down, see if they're running around suspended. If I'm not getting any bites suspended, then I'll just let it hit the bottom and then give it 3, 4, 5 cranks of the reel and set it there just a few feet off the bottom. But I've got a big 4-ounce no roll on here, and for the amount of, like, Hoover doesn't have very much of any current, so you could use 1.5 ounces. 2 ounces works really good. But then again, if you get drifting anywhere over a 0.5 mile an hour, if the wind's beating it up, then your bait might end up a little higher in the water column. So I like 3 or 4 ounces to hold it down there. That way I know that it's exactly where I want it to be. And it's just basically Carolina rigged. I've got a barrel swivel here, and I got a 5/0 circle hook with a no-knot snail and the no-roll sinker here. And this is a good setup if you were anchored or if you were bank fishing and needed to fling it out there. The no-roll slides. You know, if I was in the river, this would be a good setup too. So would that one, but I would probably use a little bigger hook. I'd go more towards a 7/0 if I was out there flathead fishing. I don't mind the smaller hook at Hoover because the blues have only been in there since 2011, so they're not monsters yet. There's some good sized fish in there. I'm sure the biggest is probably floating around the low 40s. I know a handful of people that have caught low to mid 30s, and I've caught 5 of them here the last 2 months that were over 20 pounds, the biggest 25 pounds. So the 5/0, 6/0 works for me for what I'm doing right now. And I also just I just ordered some sinker slides, so I can get a little bit different presentation here. I can take this rig that I just showed you, my drifting rig, and instead of using this no roll, I can just run my line through this sinker slide here. Still use the Carolina rig with the swivel and everything, but I can take either a bank sinker. I got some 2.5 ounce bank sinkers here. I could clip one of these on here, or these big circle weights, big 4-ounce circle weight, and it's the same thing. It's still a Carolina rig. It's still slides. You can still anchor fish with it. You can still suspend it. It just gives you a little bit more versatility as far as being able to change weights depending on your situation. If I go from, say I had a 2-ounce bank sinker drifting on here, and all of a sudden I'm not going to Hoover, I'm going to head to the Muskingum River and chase some flatheads. Well, then I can just, instead of changing my whole rig, if I don't have any frays or abrasions and everything's sound, I can just clip the bank sinker off and throw one of them big 4-ounce circle sinkers on there, and I'm ready to roll. Or, you know, anything. You get out on the water and it rains, the water current picks up, or it starts to get windier, and you have to get to a little bit bigger weight, you can switch it on the fly without cutting it. So, you know, I'm happy about having those. But so that's the basics for me. There's all kinds of rigs you can do. There's no right or wrong rig. There's no right or wrong way to tie your knots. I like to use a no-knot snail for my leader line on my hook, and then I use mostly polymer knots throughout the rest of the setup. And I might do some videos on that to help you guys out too. But for now, those are the rigs that I use the most when I'm out drifting and suspending in the reservoir. I hope that helps some of you guys out.